Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and clicking on this video. My name is Doug Floyd. I'm the general manager of Hart House Theatre, and this is our second in a series of artist chats. And today we are joined all the way from Nova Scotia by Agustine Scarpa. Agustine, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
It's good to see you. And today gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we don't get to talk about as much, and that is Backstage and the impact that Hart House Theatre can have on volunteers and our volunteer program of people who work backstage. So, Agustine, you are a costume designer, a stylist. You're a current student at Dalhousie in Nova Scotia in the Costume Studies program. You volunteered at Hart House Theatre from 2014 to 2018. Many shows, which we'll talk about. Thinking just to start off, Agustine, what made you walk into Hart House Theatre for the first time, and how did that come about?
Well, I've always been really interested in the creative side of theater, the backstage, and the costume department in general is something I've always been interested in. So when it came time for me to collect volunteer hours for high school, I came across Hart House Theatre online. So I think I just Googled volunteer opportunities for students interested in costume making. And Hart House Theatre was one of the first search results. And I know that now you would typically do a bit more research and compare your search results with other options. But at the time, Hart House was really the only place that was not only had a volunteer program, but was also celebrating it and advertising it online. So that was kind of how I came across it. And then I reached out. The website was really accessible, and I was invited to go to the volunteer night that summer, where we toured the space and learned a bit about what it meant to be a volunteer at Hart House. And I just kind of instantly fell in love with everything. Yeah, it was a really cool way to get introduced to theater.
Well, you just made our marketing people very happy. I'm glad that it was a happy accident a little bit then, which is
yeah,
good.
definitely.
Yeah, great. So you worked on so many shows with us that I just thought I would just list them off because I think it's important for people to know that. How many shows you made an impact on? So your first show with us was The Tempest as an assistant costume designer. That was back in 2014, and that's when. So you were still in high school, right? If you could explain that.
Yeah, I was 14 when that show happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And then 2015, Jesus Christ Superstar, Wardrobe Build Crew, and then Hamlet, Wardrobe Build Crew, Into the Woods, Wardrobe Build Crew, and that was quite the build crew from what I remember of Into the Woods.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And on that same season, Boeing, assistant costume designer and makeup. Carrie the Musical, assistant costume designer. Hedwig and the Angry Inch, assistant wig designer, builder, stylist. So it wasn't just costumes, but you worked on hair and makeup as well.
Yeah. There were a lot of cool opportunities.
And the last show you worked us on was The Crucible in 2018 as assistant costume designer. So that's a long list of credits. If you could just sort of talk a little bit about what is the backstage environment like? What does it mean to volunteer at Hart House Theatre? Is there any kind of support system?
Definitely, there is a huge support system. I remember when I first worked on The Tempest, it was really intimidating because I knew nothing about theater or working in theater really. So it was kind of like at first sight, it was a very like fast-paced environment, and it was really creative as well. But Jillian, who's the volunteer coordinator, and Kathleen Black, who was the designer for The Tempest, the costume designer, and the whole cast and crew were just so welcoming and supportive that I really quickly adapted to that environment. And so, yeah, but it's really great because you do get to kind of not only work with industry professionals, but you learn directly from them. So they're really there guiding you. And I remember at the same time feeling like I was treated as part of the crew. And so it was a really kind of cool, supportive environment where you learned a lot, but you also got to help out a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, many times you get out what you put in, and you put in a lot. And I have to say, my impression of you and everyone's impression of you is that you did make a huge impact at Hart House Theatre, and you were a sponge in a way. You were looking to learn as much as possible and to take advantage of every opportunity that you could, and you certainly did that. And one of the people you mentioned, Kathleen Black, who costume designed for us many shows, and you worked with her on several occasions for sure. She knew we were doing this today, and she said a little thing about you that I wanted to share with you and embarrass you a little bit, because that's what I do. So she said, I knew the second I met Augustine, dressed head to toe in 1940s fashion, that she had a unique perspective. She handled her work as meticulously as she pin-rolled her hair, and I was always grateful for the way she dedicated herself to projects 200%. 200%, not even 100%. So I know there's one show in particular that Kathleen really had you more of a partner than an assistant. I don't know if assistant is always the right way to call these titles, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about Boeing and what that experience was like. And as a volunteer and as a costume assistant with Kathleen, did she just give you a list of things to do, or were you part of the process?
Well, I was definitely integrated in the whole kind of background of creating the costumes. I remember, I think it was one of the first times that I was really involved with the kind of making a few decisions. And I remember being backstage, being at the kind of read-throughs where the actors would just read the plays, and we would make notes on what we think, where we would think this quick change would have to happen, and whatnot. It was a really interesting kind of research position at first, and then it morphed into something completely creative. I think both Kathleen and I were kind of thrown into this really cool environment of like 1960s stewardesses and just like really fun costumes. It was a really great concept, and yeah, I think it was great because I was definitely part of the kind of I really did a lot of research into every part of the wardrobe department then. I think that I did makeup and building stuff, a bit of designing, not just like looking at pulling stuff from Value Village and whatnot, and just a lot of really fun kind of tasks that I normally would never have been a part of if I'd just kind of gone through high school without seeing Hart House or being part of that community. So yeah, I was definitely part of that show. I think it was a great great environment. It was a great time to work as a student, I think. Yeah.
Well, on that show in particular, Kathleen did send me one more item to share. She said, when I was tasked at building a 1960s bullet bra with a cup size big enough for physical comedy gags, I knew exactly who would be perfect at making such a piece appear accurate to the time period. So,
Yes.
you remember working on that item?
I do. It was a lot of, it was a very fiddly project. It was a lot of fun. They were very large bra. It was great. And yeah, I think it was, again, that kind of like just being thrown into this crazy creative environment, not really, just kind of figuring things out as you go. It was great.
So from the list of shows that you worked on Shakespeare, you worked on musicals, you worked on comedies, and the Crucible as well, which doesn't fit in any of those categories. Do you have any other stories, any other memories from a show that you'd like to share?
Well, going back to The Tempest, I remember The first time that I met Kathleen, we went to Stratford to look at the Stratford wardrobe department to pull some things for the show. And I think that was the first time I realized how big this industry was, or is. I think it was just mind-blowing to be not only in that space, but also to be pulling stuff for a different show, and being able to see all of the historical costumes, all of the this huge warehouse of all these really stimulating items. It was just a great place to be introduced to the costume department. I never knew that it could be that kind of magical. So I think that was one of my favorite memories, is just seeing that. And I think that, Hart House really did open me up to a place I never knew existed. Because I think as a kid, you hear all about kind of the wardrobe department, but you never know the kind of scale of it all. So yeah, it was great to be working in a small theater that opened me up to this huge world that I never knew was real.
Great. And speaking of like the sort of whole experience of working in wardrobe, there's someone also that I know made an impact on your time at Hart House Theatre, and that's Jennifer Jacobs, and she held the position of head of wardrobe. Could you talk a little bit about what does that mean, head of wardrobe, and how would that position have impacted your experience?
So a head of wardrobe, I think it's kind of a tough position to explain, because it's a very kind of, you have to have a lot of organizational skills. There are a lot of people that are in the wardrobe department. There's a lot of work that goes into building costumes for a show. So head of wardrobe a lot of the times is there managing the entire staff and making sure that everything is going to plan. But at Hart House, Jennifer also did a lot of the costume building, and I remember she was also kind of tasked with teaching the wardrobe crew. A lot of the times we had people come in who had never sewn before, and Jennifer was always there to kind of make sure they knew what they were doing, and help them out when they didn't. And then also build costumes, helped with every stage. She was kind of, I guess, if there's a, I think if there's a title that could better explain what it means, I think it's almost like a partner to the costume designer. Like, they're really there to guide that whole area of costume making and scheduling and all that stuff.
Right, and also one of the things that the head of wardrobe does at Hart House is during the run of the show, when we get up to opening night and everyone's building and building and building, and that's where you did the majority of your work and time at Hart House. And then when it came to opening night, usually the costume designer says, "Okay, I'm good. I did my job. Bye bye, everyone." Right, and then it was in Jennifer's hands, really, the show, right, and like how the show would run. How did quick changes run? How did laundry get done? I mean, could you talk a little bit about how much volume of work there is once a show opens? It's not like the work is over, is it?
No, not at all. It's really intense. It's a great it's great, but it's a lot of work, because as you said, you do have to I think as a head of wardrobe, one does have to like manage the laundry and manage just run the entire costume related part of the show, which is quite important. Like, actors need their costumes to go on stage. So Jennifer was running the ship, and she was also, again, at the same time, teaching everyone who came in to help. So it was not only like the volunteers would come in to do quick changes and to learn about dressing and to do laundry and repairs, and then repair costumes that we needed to return to their stock and like organize the stock after the show was over. But then Jennifer also had to do all of that and then teach everyone who was coming in to help her.
Right. So sometimes when you rent a costume, you have to make alterations to it so it fits. But then do you have to make alterations to bring it back sometimes?
Yes.
Right.
If just renting it, you have to make sure that it goes back in the same condition that you received it. So yeah, I know there was a lot of that for Into the Woods.
Right. Yeah, because there's so many costumes for Into the Woods. I mean, it was um, the costumes were really delicate because of the nature of what they were, right? So there was lots of repairs and lots of ongoing things for that, for sure. And then in terms of like the team for wardrobe, I know it changed every show because depending on the scale and the volume of the show, the smaller shows like Boeing, where you have, 6, 7, 8 actors versus Tempest Into the Woods Superstar, where there's 16 plus, it's a different ball game. But how many volunteers would be part of the wardrobe build sometimes? Because I know that's something that Jillian does a lot of work on, is to bring in as many volunteers as possible.
There are a lot of volunteers in the wardrobe department. I think it's hard again to like give an exact number because it does change. Even with the larger shows, because sometimes you have people coming in for almost like shifts, like coming in to help one night and then kind of bouncing off of each other. So, but I think I usually worked with a team of like up to like over five people definitely for almost every show. And a lot of them were students from U of T. Coming to help and getting in touch with their creative side again. So that was really cool to see.
And I was just going to mention that your experience at Hart House Theatre is a bit of a unique one because the majority of the volunteers at Hart House Theatre are U of T students, and I'd say 75 to 80% are U of T students. But there are also opportunities for other members of the Toronto community, and your story is a really good example of that, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like an apprenticeship, I think, for me at least, because I continued working there for a long time because it's just such a wonderful like environment to learn. Yeah, I kind of felt like just like a 4-year learning program. Like it was really great. It was amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of experiential learning that you did at Hart House Theatre that you weren't, or that just wasn't available at high school. So you balanced all the work from a usual high school student, and you had this pseudo university experience at the same time.
Kind of. It was yeah. It's I went to an alternative school, so they were really open to me spending a lot of time at Hart House Theatre, and so it did supplement a lot of my learning. It was and it was very useful because I ended up making really important connections with other designers as well, and that I still rely on today. And I remember I learned about more opportunities outside of Hart House as well through Hart House. So yeah, it was. I think it's a great way. It's not only just a learning experience. It is also kind of building on your professional life as well.
Yeah. And that's an opportunity that Hart House Theatre can give, and most of the time we celebrate that with the people on stage. So it's great to take the opportunity today to talk about the many opportunities that are backstage, right? But that is to shine the light on that a little bit more. And I must say, Augustine, I can tell that you are a designer because look at your background and look at my background. It's so boring in this place, and you've got this colorful couch and things on the walls. It's great. So I guess so. It's actually interesting talking about your sort of high school experience and Hart House, because then your next step was Dalhousie. And do you think your experience at Hart House Theatre helped attain your acceptance into that program?
Oh, definitely. Coming from an alternative background, a lot of my university applications were portfolio based, and I included every show I worked on at Hart House in my portfolio that I used to get into Dalhousie's costume studies program. So definitely, it was, and I still use a lot of the skills that I learned at Hart House in my practical courses at Dalhousie, because it is also theater based. So I do rely on a lot of the kind of networking skills I learned at Hart House, the costume building skills, and again, working in a fast-paced environment. Mhm.
Great.
Great.
So can you maybe tell us a little bit about your experience at Dal so far? You've been on the East Coast, and what's that program like? And were you going into your final year, or where are you in terms of your university time right now?
I'm entering my third year at the costume studies program. So I just finished 2 years of really practical courses, and we're going to be moving on to working in theater and doing kind of more experiential learning. So I'm really excited to kind of get back into that same uh, mood that I was in at Hart House.
Yeah, great. And there's a particular project that you're working on now and have worked on for several months. I hope you can share with our audience today. It's called the Women in Horror Project. And there's a website we'll tell people about and link to. What is that, and what is your involvement with Women in Horror? What does that mean? What is that?
So I'm kind of co-directing and co-costume designing with a fellow costume studies peer, Eleanor Gillies Nielsen, and we're working with a collective of 9 students from Dalhousie's Fountain School of Performing Arts. It's an alternative theater project. It discusses the roles of women in classic horror films and kind of the social, historical, cultural impacts that those women, those female characters have had. It uses a lot of kitsch and humor. Kind of reminds me of Boeing in that way. It's almost a bit of a comedic examination or exploration of women in horror. Yeah, and it features a lot of really cool wearable art, artistic films, unique sound design, and it's really interactive. So it's a very fun project. And again, I'm using a lot of Hart House's, kind of my experience at Hart House in this project, especially because it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of creative work. So I'm able to kind of, again, draw on those skills of navigating a kind of tense environment, or not tense, but like fast paced. Yeah.
Right. And was that a project that has changed since the pandemic pause, I guess you could say? Was it supposed to be a different type of project, and now you are changing it, or to more of a virtual thing?
Well, we kind of started this in the midst of the pandemic, or
Okay.
really early on, and it has definitely changed a lot. A lot of the festivals we were going to apply to have changed their deadlines, and we're still hoping to present it as a kind of in-person production, but we are using a lot of virtual aspects as well through the artistic films that we're including and all of that. Hopefully, in Nova Scotia, things are going pretty well, and we might be able to present in person at a few art festivals here. And we're also thinking about doing some filmed run-throughs for the folks who can't see it. But yeah, a lot of that is up in the air right now, but we're
Yeah.
still working on it and working through isolation and all that stuff.
A lot of everything's up in the air right now, so I'm not surprised to
Yeah.
hear that. But if
Yes.
if people want to learn more about that and have a look at that, the website is womeninhorrorproject.weebly.com.
Yes, and we also have an Instagram called, I think it's just at the Women in Horror. So yeah, feel free to check all that out.
Well, fantastic. I'm sure people will, and I know that we will as well at Hart House Theatre. We'll keep an eye on that and share your progress with that as well. And so, Augustine, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think that we were able to, like I said, shine the light a little bit backstage, because it's always on stage. So we can talk a little bit about what happens backstage some more at Hart House Theatre. And I must say, Augustine, you've made an incredible impact on everyone at Hart House Theatre. We miss you very, very much, and we're very happy that you're doing so well at Dalhousie. And we can't wait, if you choose to come back to Toronto, to work with you again It would be fantastic to have you back, and best of luck with this Women in Horror project and your final year at Dal.
Oh, thank you so much. This is an incredible opportunity, and I highly encourage anyone who is interested in learning about theater or working in theater to check out Hart House. It's such a wonderful environment.